Hi everyone, good to see you all kind of trickling in. We're gonna get started 3 after the hour, just to give folks a little bit of time. So in about 1 minute.
Thank you.
Alrighty, so it's 3:03. I'm gonna go ahead and give our office hours a bit of a start. Um, So as always, office hours are totally optional, but we've been trying to have a little bit of some presentation to give everyone a bit of a mini technical assistance, something to dialogue and discuss. So this month we have some folks from Listen4Good who are going to give us a presentation about community engagement. So I'm gonna let them introduce themselves, and as always, if you need to ask me specific questions, either feel free to message me directly or stay on after. I'll still be here, and we'll go ahead and record the session as well. So, um, Sachi, would you like to start with the introductions?
Sure. Thank you so much for having us. My name is Sachi. I'm Associate Director of Partner Services at Listen4Good. I'm really excited to get to know y'all a little bit, learn from you, and also share a little bit about Listen4Good. By way of background, my background is not in the health area. It's actually in education. I started out my career working in schools. So I worked in an elementary school and a K-8 school with an AmeriCorps program called City Year, and then worked at a school district, a state department of ed, and in an education nonprofit before coming to Listen4Good. So I'm going to be playing backup to Heidi today, and happy to answer any questions that y'all have. I'll pass it over to Heidi.
Great. Thank you, Sachi. So my name is Heidi. I'm the Senior Coordinator of Partner Services here at Listen4Good. My role is really to help our organizations and nonprofit partners figure out what Listen4Good is, how Listen4Good can support their work. I've been here for about 5 months, and similar to Sachi, I come from the youth development field. So I went youth development, that kind of transition to organizational and leadership development, because it turns out that the things that young people need are the same things that adults need in their lives to thrive and succeed. So yeah, so I have a hopefully brief presentation to present. So I'll share my screen in just a second. And then we have time for questions. And because this is such a good sized group, I'm actually think after a few general questions about like the things that we shared, if you all have kind of more specific questions, we'll break out into a couple of breakout groups so that you have a space to ask some maybe questions that are more specific to your use case. So great. So we're going to talk about how to engage your clients and how feedback is so crucial to the work that we do. So I'm going to skip that, but I'd like to start us with a quick grounding question. So just so we kind of get an idea, how many of you have recently, and define recent however you would like, tried to gather input from your clients? And I'm curious, how did that process go for you? So in the chat, if you can throw in a number 1 through 5, 1 being it was a really frustrating experience, didn't feel very useful, 5 being it was a wonderful experience and we got a lot of useful information. How did that feel? I'll give you all a moment to throw a number in there. Okay, this is wonderful. Seeing lots of 3s and 4s. So there's something there, right? There's probably some good data that's coming out. But maybe there's something that wants to be polished a little bit or grown a little bit, some more insights maybe or responses. So let's talk a little bit about what this can look like. So I'm going to make a small case for feedback, why it's so crucial to our organizations, and then talk about effective feedback practices. What are they? What do they look like? How do we know when we have them? And then we'll have some time for a Q&A, and then just a brief overview of what Listen for Good is and how we approach helping organizations grow their feedback practices. So feedback is useful in lots and lots of different ways. I'm going to touch upon 3 ways that we've really seen feedback be something that has helped organizations, with a couple of examples along the way. So the first is that building high quality feedback loops are crucial to improving client experience and the impact of our organizations. We know that acting on feedback helps organizations move towards their goals of equity, diversity, and inclusion. And I know that's something that this group is thinking about. And then feedback is also a powerful tool for storytelling, advocacy, and fundraising. So I'm going to give a few examples of how this works for different organizations. So the first organization I want to share is the Lone Star Circle of Care, which is a health organization in Texas. And so they have 18 health clinics throughout the state. And so when they partnered with Listen for Good, it was because they were rolling out, or in conjunction with, what they called their language of caring communication model. So they knew that if their clients had positive experiences in their clinics, they would be more likely to have positive health outcomes because, for example, they would be more likely to follow doctor directives, right? The things that lead to better health outcomes were also contingent upon the experience that they were having at these clinics. And so in their Listen for Good project, they were asking their clients to talk about their experience in ways that they asked, did our staff explain what they were doing and why? Did you get proactive updates around your time? Were you treated with respect? Those types of things that they wanted to measure because they knew that it had an impact on their clients. And when they first did this survey, they were hearing that their clients rarely or sometimes or even never experience these sorts of things. And so what they were able to do is disaggregate that data by site and by skill, because it wasn't all sites, it wasn't all skills. They were able to retrain their staff just according to those things that the surveys showed. And when they retrained their staff on those skills and in those sites, they found that clients were much more likely to respond, that they experience these things all of the time. So in, what is ultimately a fairly short period of time, they were able to improve client experience based on the feedback that they got. So we also know that feedback is so crucial to our DEI efforts. And one of the main ways that we do this through our feedback is by disaggregating our data. And so this is an example of a youth organization that surveyed their clients, their families. And when they disaggregated their data by race and ethnicity, they saw that different populations, particularly their Black and multiracial families, were having a much different experience than their Hispanic and white families. Similar to Lone Star, they were able to take this data and focus their retraining on what the data showed. And what they found is that when they implemented their trainings, they found that across the board, all groups showed higher satisfaction rates. And so we know that feedback is really, however, the base, the starting point for our DEI efforts. It's really the first place that we begin to establish incorporating client voice in our work, which is so crucial to our efforts. And so we know that having a good practice of feedback is the base of improving client engagement. So if we go up the client engagement pyramid, we then go to co-creation, where we actually have our clients involved in the feedback process. Creating surveys, helping to implement it, looking at those results and saying, here's what I'm seeing, here's what I think we should do. It can lead to client advisory structures being developed, and ultimately having clients be a part of our organizations as staff or board members. But even when you have that, right, feedback is what allows us to get a broad understanding, and not just from those staff members who have the time and ability, right, to move up that engagement. So finally, feedback is a really powerful tool for storytelling, advocacy, and fundraising. And I want to give just one quick example of how this happens. So Habitat for Humanity of Greater Memphis, in addition to kind of what I know Habitat does of building homes, they have a really wonderful program where they help older residents age in place by retrofitting their homes that they live in so that they have more accessibility. So things like ramps and grab bars and those sorts of things. And so when they surveyed those homeowners who have experienced these changes to their home, what they found was they said, these are really great and these are really helpful. However, I don't always know how to use them. How can I use them? And so they were able to take the stories and that feedback from those who participated in the program back to their board and back to their funders to make the case for why they needed a staff member to help do that. And so they were actually able to hire a social worker to help fill that need. And that was based on what their clients were telling them. So ultimately, we know that good feedback helps us build these really, help us build stronger programs, right? By directly, helping us improve programs or offerings, by moving us further along our DEI goals, and ultimately letting us tell the stories of our clients in order to advocate for them and also to help fundraise for the programs that we want to expand. So we know feedback's really important. And a lot of organizations are at different stages in their feedback process. We also know that in a lot of places and a lot of organizations, feedback is really seen as a linear process where we collect data, we interpret that data, and sometimes it stops there, right? We get some really great feedback and it gets saved in a folder, it gets put in a drawer, and that is where the feedback lives. And we know that feedback is not a linear process. It is, in fact, a circular process, and we like to envision it as a loop. And so we've broken it down into 5 steps. So what that looks like. First, we start with designing a survey that really focuses on the client experience. The experiences are what we're focusing on because that's what clients are able to share. That's what allows us to improve our programs. We also really want to make sure that we're tailoring that data collection to a way that fits with our clients' needs, their abilities, and we're going to talk a little bit about what that is. We also want to make sure that from that data, we're drawing really key insights that help us actually make changes in our organizations, because that's our 4th step. That means celebrating, that means improving, that means sharing, but actually responding to the feedback that's provided. And finally, by closing the loop, by sharing the results back with our clients. And we'll talk about why that's so important. So what I'm going to do is just take a moment to go through each step and provide a few best practices for each one. And we're happy to share this, so don't feel the need to take notes on everything. So just really quickly. So we really want to start with survey design, thinking about how to make sure that our surveys are accessible and that they're relevant. So we want to make sure that they're actionable things that we can actually make changes or respond to within our organization. So, right, we're not collecting data for collections data collection's sake. So you'll want to think about a few things, some of them being, is this accessible to your clients in both language and readability? So you want to think about if your audience is younger, if they may have learning disabilities, what are their primary languages spoken amongst your clients? And make sure that the survey is accessible in that way. You also want to think about how long does it take to complete your survey. Really, 5 minutes is the ideal time for survey completion. That's why making sure that those questions are questions you really need, questions you can respond to. The longer the survey is, the less likely your clients will actually complete their survey. And then, are the questions actionable? Can you do something about them? When it comes to survey administration, we really want to think about capturing as many voices as possible and as representative as possible. So we want to think about how we communicate these questions and how we communicate this to our clients. So you want to make sure that clients understand that this is about improving. There's no it's consequence free, it's anonymous or confidential as possible that you can make it, and that you'll share back their responses. And you can be really creative in ways that you do this. A youth serving organization, they had their young people share about it through a TikTok. Other organizations do it by sharing posters. So you want to be creative in the ways that you let people know about the survey and the point of the survey. You also want to think when you are interpreting your data, which is our next step, thinking about how you can find things to celebrate, find ways to improve. And this is where having a representative sample is really important, because you want to be able to disaggregate your data by race and ethnicity, by age, by language spoken, by gender. And if you don't have a large enough sample size, then you're not going to be able to pull out generalizable information. So you want to think about when you're collecting how important it is so that you can analyze and get really good insight. When we respond to our surveys, it's really about engaging both those internal and external stakeholders. You want to consider how you're going to present this information that you share. So not everyone needs to know everything. How do you think about your board members? How do you think about each program to really share that information in a way that's useful to them? And then identifying the low-hanging fruit that you can prioritize responses. And then closing the loop. That's when you let your partners know what you learned and how you plan to respond. And our best practice for this is to just do it. This one is one that gets forgotten or lost a lot in the process. So think about the way you already communicate and how you can share updates, right? If it's through posters or pamphlets, in a meeting, emails or text, really just get creative. And I'm just going to show you one quick example of how one organization did this. They made these beautiful posters and they placed them in places where their clients congregated. So when we have all of these steps in place, we're able to get really good feedback practices. And so that's what Listen4Good is geared to do. We support our nonprofit partners through a capacity building program to help you improve your feedback practices and to think about things like equity throughout the way. We work throughout the country, and we work with a wide variety of organizations. So we work with our direct service organizations, our public sector organizations, and as well as capacity building partners who are there to support their organizations. And how do we do that? We do that through 3 main pillars of support. The first is our self-guided tools. So we have a web app that integrates with SurveyMonkey that really makes the technical parts of surveying as seamless and as useful as possible to really help with the creation, the collection, the analysis parts, make that really easy for you. We also have group learning opportunities. We work in a cohort model. So even though the program is self-paced, as you go through the process, you're going through it with similar organizations who are going in a similar pace. So they also have best practices to show. And then we have customized coaching. So you have a coach who will help be your thought partner throughout the whole process and help you think through your plans. I have one more slide and then we're going to go to questions. So we do this through two different programs, and they're very similar in key ways. So they're both 18 months. They both give you access to the same SurveyMonkey program account. You have access to the same peer communities and you have access to the same webinars. The main difference is in the coaching. So our premium core program, you have a dedicated coach who goes through the entire process with you at every step of the way as your thought partner. And our online program is more independent, and you basically reach out to a coach at key moments when you need one. So that's all the information I'm going to throw at you right now. But I would love to stop here, and actually I'm going to stop sharing as well to see if there's any questions. I know that was a lot of information. You can throw a question in chat or you can unmute to ask. Appreciate that. Thanks, Carrie. Okay. If there are no questions for the big group, then I think this would be a great time to do a little breakout. And then, to be honest, we can ask you some questions, and we can talk about kind of your specific feedback practices, and we can answer any questions that way. So
I have a question.
Yes.
So I see that your model at the end, and in terms of the cohorts, is it kind of miscellaneous, like whoever comes in at a given time, or do you have a way to kind of segment out the different types of organizations, or say more in terms of what does it mean to be a cohort? And also, do you just work directly with organizations or only through the cohort?
Yeah, that's a good question. Okay. So the cohort is really time-based. So we start the program at 2 points in the year. The first being a January cohort that'll start in January and then run for 18 months. And the second starting in July and then running for 18 months. So those cohorts tend to be about 100 people or so, 100 organizations or so. You can actually invite as many people from your organization as you want to join the webinars. And so in those, it's anyone who is starting at your time. We do share organization kind of with each other, so you can kind of look at who's involved and identify orgs who are doing similar work that you're doing. I know we've had people who have seen like, oh, they mentioned something that they're doing, and then they'll just email the person and connect with similar organizations that way. We do facilitate conversations in those webinars. Your coach will be working with you outside of those webinars.
Okay.
So they'll be working directly with you.
Okay.
Yeah,
Thank
you for that. Of course.
All right, I'm gonna open the rooms for everyone, and you'll just, at the bottom, where you would normally, find your mute, unmute, camera, etc. Usually under the three dots, there'll be the option to join a breakout room, and you'll just pick one of the two rooms, and be able to to join one of those. If you have questions specifically for me, I'll be in the main room.
Oh, yeah. I took notes on ours. I thought it was fascinating. Thank you all so much for sharing. I have with you, and then otherwise, we're happy to stick around and continue to answer questions, or we'll give that time back to Danielle, so you all can ask her your questions. So if you just 1 minute, there we go. So we did our breakout. So we talked a little bit about the cohorts, right? Sometimes it's helpful to have a visual of what that actually looks like. So, and why we have an 18-month process. So it's 18 months, not because we think it'll take 18 months to go through a survey, but because we find that it takes most organizations approximately 6 to 9 months to get through one survey process, everything from designing that survey all the way to closing the loop and responding to it in the middle. So on average, our organizations take 6 to 9 months. We find that gives organizations then enough time to go through at least 2 loops with the program. We do that because the goal here is so that your capacity, your ability to do these surveys is good. So you're able to build that muscle up and then practice it a little bit so that at the end of your engagement with Listen4Good, you can wash, rinse, repeat on your own. And that's something that your organization can do without having to reach out to external consultants, without having to kind of Google and DIY it along the way. So we want to give you room to really establish those processes. So if you're starting in January, typically you're looking at a spring survey. If you're starting in July, you're oftentimes looking at like an early fall or a fall survey, even a mid to late fall survey. So organizations will take that into consideration. We also find there are research-based survey questions that we always have in our surveys that are required as a part of the Listen4Good program. And so with those questions, I'm sharing those questions to kind of you to get an idea of what the survey would look like. So it asks questions about whether or not your clients would recommend your program or your organization. What is the organization good at, and where could the organization do better? These are key questions that help us create a benchmark score so that you can actually compare your organization to organizations who do similar work. Because depending on the type of clientele you have or the types of services you provide, you'll get a wide variety of typical responses. So this helps you kind of see how you are compared to your peer orgs. We also ask if the program is meeting needs and if people are being treated with respect. These questions really help key you into important parts of your client experience and really start to establish directions that you can move in and ways that you can respond. And then those demographic questions around age, gender, race, and ethnicity that help you pull out those questions to make sure that different populations are having the experience that you would like. And so you would then add more questions. And as we said, we want to really think about what are those key questions that you want to add to support your specific program, but that are actionable, right? So that they provide insight that you can help share or build upon your organization, with your organization. And then we have some next steps if this is something you would be interested in continuing with. So our current cohort just started, right, in the beginning of January, and they just kicked off. And so our next cohort will be starting in June. And so we have a really simple registration form that organizations will fill out. And our next session our next session starts in July, and the registration due date is June 1st. And, Sachi and I are available, to answer questions along the way if you're starting to explore what your feedback practices look like, and who you want to share this within your organization. We have information sessions that go starting, I think our first one is next week, and then they're going to be running consistently until July. So if there's anyone in your organization that you'd like to share this information with, you can share our contact. You can share our at our website, listen4good.org. You can sign up for more webinars, and they'll get similar information to what we just shared. Some organizations, when they're thinking about this, really like to know what the commitment is. And so we find that it takes about 8 to 10 hours of one person's time. And so you want to per month, and that's all inclusive. So that's not just meeting with your coach and attending webinars. That's also building out the survey, programming it, putting it out in the field, analyzing the responses, all of the steps. So it varies according to, where in the year you are, what step you're at, but you can expect about 8 to 10 hours. So that's all that I have for you. I'm going to stop sharing. If that brought up any questions, I'm happy to give you all a moment to ask those questions. So, we're happy to share our contact info. So any follow-up questions, and happy to share the slides as well. So we can do that. And then, yeah, if there's no other questions, I am happy to give you your time back.
Thank you so much, Heidi and Sachi, for the presentation. I hope that a lot of folks really enjoyed hearing a bit about the work that you all do at Listen4Good and kind of the cohort process, etc. Everything is recorded, and then we'll follow up, sharing everyone's contact information so that if folks would like to reach back out to them or what have you, you'll be able to. But any questions either about Listen4Good or activities for your council and grants, so kind of any questions that you have for me and Lindsay, feel free.